Can everybody hear this? It's really very amazing that we've got such a good crowd out here, despite half of Sun City moving to Florida and the snow and the weather and what have you. I really appreciate everybody coming out in the weather that we have. As Frank has mentioned several times, we have a box of various cartridges for printers in the back. These are cartridges that were donated generally when people bought a new printer. If they had cartridges, they brought them in. So they're back there. If you can use any of those cartridges, you're free to take them. And they're all new cartridges. They're all in the original packages and what have you. So, okay. With that in mind, I think we will start. Oh, one thing, would you please turn off or put on airport mode your cell phones? I think we're going over basically the same types of things we usually do. We'll talk about club matters, our finances, and then our presentation. Our finances are, again, as I said before, very solid. We're doing well. Some of you have noticed we have approved commitments, which you approved back in August, that we've been holding back on. We're waiting for some changes in technology, and it isn't a question that we're not going to get equipment. It's a question of just what equipment and when we purchase that. And again, I'd like to compliment everybody on. You'll notice that we contributed a goodly amount to the food pantry. We have 1,638 members, and that's way ahead of last year, and we're really amazed at that. And compliments to Joe Quinn. For the first time in a long time, our numbers are in agreement with CAM's numbers. This has been a bit of an ongoing discussion because of our newsletter goes out off the CAM database. But one of the things we did notice in that reconciliation process is we still have 200 and some members, quote unquote members, who do not have email addresses in their profiles on the CAM database, which is the website database. It's not just a question of us. Everyone, all the clubs, CAM itself, use that database as a basis for mailing information out. So it behooves everybody to make sure that email address, that forwarding email address is correct. And 1234@nowhere.com does not work very well. There are quite a few people who have done that, and really it's important to change that. I think a lot of it, you might want to check with sponsors, because I've had this come up where somebody said, well, my wife's never changed hers, or in some cases the wife said, well, my husband's never changed his, because we have one, we get one message at home, and that's sufficient. And well, that's probably true. It's still better if we can get all these email addresses straightened out, and it would be to the benefit of everyone. Okay, winter classes. We have good news and bad news. Well, I guess it's already been taken off of there. So we did have a class scheduled, I believe next Wednesday on 8.1. We're going to cancel that class and reschedule it. We will notify everyone when the rescheduled date is going to be scheduled. We have several classes coming up on Introduction to Computer, Gmail. One of the things we're doing in the spring session, because this has come up in the lab quite a bit, we're going to have classes on email. Well, we've always had a class on email, but this time what's different, we're going to have a class on Gmail and Yahoo Mail specifically, because there are certain, there are generalities that are common between them, but when it gets down to settings and how you use some of the settings, they vary. And we've had a lot of confusion on that, so we're going to this will be the first one on Gmail that'll go into the specifics of Gmail. So if you're using yahoo.com, it's going to be Gmail. So, okay. These are a couple of things that are coming up that have nothing to do with the club, but might be of interest to any of you. Windows 10 supposedly will be released in the fall 2015. That gives you just enough time to understand Windows 8 before you move on. Galaxy is going to come up with a new machine, and the iPad Pro, which is going to be a larger iPad. I'm understanding, and I'm not the Apple guru here, but I'm understanding that's supposed to be geared at competing with Surface as a business machine. But there are also a couple of new phones that are going to be coming out. So if you're thinking of getting a new phone, you might want to look into these phones and wait until they come out if you're interested in being right on the cutting technology. We have a special interest group on photography. They're going to have a meeting coming up on the 12th. They meet on Monday evenings in the lab. They're going to talk about bracketing, which those of you who are familiar with photography understand that. If you're not familiar with the concept, you might want to learn about it. It's a very helpful thing in terms of getting the right exposure on your pictures. For further information on that, if you can contact Jeff and Jeff Stipes, and he can give you more information on the group, and you're all invited to attend. If you all show up in the lab on that Monday, we'll have to do something about that, because obviously the lab won't hold that many people, but we would like to deal with that problem. So if you're interested in photography, please come to that meeting. It's kind of a reoccurring theme, but if you have any interest in any articles or any topics of interest, even if you don't have them complete as an article, if you can forward those to Bob Markham, Jim Nelson for the newsletter, we'd really appreciate that. Also, if you have any information on topics you would like to have as a general presentation at our meetings on Saturdays, please forward those to Frank or myself. Community Matters, the annual meeting of the board will be on 21 January, General Ballroom. That's the meeting in which all of the committees will make reports, and it'll give you a very good understanding of what's happening in the community, and I encourage everyone to attend that. There's something new starting on the 7th. The committee of the whole meetings of the board will be open to the public, starting with that meeting. They'll be in the solarium, starting at 9 o'clock. And if you're interested in seeing how the board works in terms of the committee of the whole meetings, you're welcome to attend those meetings. We also wanted to announce that if any of you have natural Christmas trees, there was a joke in the paper today about the fellow burning the artificial tree, forgetting it was not natural. But if you have natural Christmas trees that you want picked up, our waste services proposed did not pick those up, but the city does. The village of Huntley will pick those up on a schedule. The details are here. They're also in Lifestyle. You're also launching a new program here at Sun City in almost all the public rooms, all the buildings. Over the next couple of weeks, there will be recycling containers placed in the room so you can recycle materials. There's a list down here of what you can recycle, but basically it's the same types of things that you would recycle at home. And you put them in one, you just go in one basket, you don't sort anything out. Just go in one basket, the service will pick them up and they will sort them out. Okay, and with that, I think we can start our presentation for today. It's sort of the time of the year when everybody makes resolutions. And usually one of those resolutions is I'm going to get organized. How long that resolution lasts depends on the individual, and I suppose depending on circumstances. But it's an important thing to think in terms of options as to how you might get organized, and your computer is one option that can help you a great deal. Today we're going to talk about some of these very quickly, by the way. We're not going to go into any depth on this. This is more of a suggestion to think about sort of a program. Online security and security in general. We'll talk about direct charges from vendors, online portfolios, online financial information searches, stock trading, credit reports, online purchasing, tax filing, and record keeping. So that's quite a bit, but we're going to go through it pretty quickly. Basically, the advantages of using your computer, and I think it's really important to recognize you don't have to do everything. It's a question of what pieces of this you want to pick up on. But no matter how you do it, it's convenient, saves you a little bit of money, and it also gives you an element of control over your finances that I don't know how you feel, but whenever I put a letter or a bill or something in the mail, I really have a queasy feeling as to whether it's going to get somewhere. It's really nice to do it online when I can look immediately and see that the bill has been paid and the deal is done. But you have to keep in mind that you can't eliminate all paperwork. There's some things that are going to be done by paper no matter how you try and how you manipulate things. But security considerations are an important part of this whole process. Now, we've gone through security considerations in detail many times, so I'm going over them very quickly here, just as a reminder that you have to think about these things. You definitely want to use a secure connection to whatever financial institution that you're using. When you sign on, make sure that the little lock shows locked and that there's an S on the HTTP. Also, again, a reminder on passwords. Passwords, don't have to be totally, they can be logical to you actually and still be very secure. But the key is mixing up the elements of your password. If you put a couple of capital letters, you put a symbol in there, a couple of numbers, and a couple of small lowercase letters in there, you'll have a very solid, secure password. And it doesn't have to be, 82 digits long. It can be 6 or 8 or 10. But breaking up the types of elements is an important part of this whole process. Now, that's your responsibility. Your financial institution's responsibility is to enforce good password standards. How many of you have signed on to a particular account and had the message come back, password is inadequate or something to that effect, and asking you for, yeah, I see. And so they're asking you to strengthen your password. Don't be offended by that. They're doing their job. They're telling you, hey, we want this to be a secure connection and you got to do your part of it. But their part of it is also that they use computer registry, and the computer registry registers your computer to their computer. And typically it's even more sophisticated. It actually registers your browser. So example, if you use Internet Explorer and you connect with Chase Bank, for example, and then you decide you don't like Internet Explorer, you want to go to Chrome, they will come back and say this is an unregistered computer, re-register it. So that's a good thing too. They're watching in terms of who's getting on their system and how. They also, most of the banks or financial institutions will allow the little thing is this your home computer or is this a temporary connection of some kind? If you put temporary connection, they'll ask you your mother's maiden name or some other additional information to identify you, and that's good. Some use Icon technology. That's where you have a little picture that also is transmitted back and forth between the computers. And if you see the picture, if your picture was a clock and you see a picture of a rose, this is not a good sign, okay? But it's a good technique because it's telling you something's wrong here on this connection. They'll also use encrypted transmissions. Just on passwords, these are some of the common passwords. You can see they really don't meet the standards we talked about a minute ago. But it's amazing what people will do with passwords just for convenience sake. This is another thing to watch for. If you sign on here and it says below there, click to view someone else's account, this is a sign that your bank security might be a little lax, and you might want to think about another bank, actually. Now, online banking is really, people come in the lab and they have mixed emotions on online banking. I think online banking, if you follow reasonable security protocols that we've just talked about, and the bank is following those, it's quite safe. It has a lot of tremendous advantages to it. Most of all, you don't have to go to the bank to conduct most of your transactions. You can transfer funds between accounts. You can pay bills. Today, you don't even have to go to the bank to deposit funds other than miscellaneous checks, and even those you can do by taking a picture of it. Because most of us get the majority of our income through direct deposits, be it Social Security, a brokerage house, whatever, pension fund, or whatever. These are all direct deposit accounts, so you don't have to go to the bank to even make a deposit on your income. But it is important, I think, that you can look at things. You can, very simply, did a check clear? Well, just look it up. You can look it up 24/7. Do you want a picture of a check? You can get a picture of both sides of the check. Print it on your printer. It just makes life a lot easier in terms of your banking transactions. I think this applies to those who aren't here that are down in Florida right now, but it does keep you close to your money in the sense that you can, hour by hour if you want, you can check to see what transactions are occurring on your accounts. Now, if you use bank paying services, you will have to, there's two ways of paying through a bank. One is to set the bank payment up through the vendor, and such would be CAM. You have to set that up with CAM, where they will go in and they'll charge your account periodically for the amount of your assessment. You can also set it up that you pay it at will or schedule, as you would schedule it, from the bank itself. If you schedule it from the bank, you have to set the bank payment plan up in terms of routing numbers and accounts and what have you. If you change vendors in one way or another, you may have to go in and change that again. Now, we just had that with CAM, but a more common one, I don't know recently, but for a long time, American Express was bouncing around between the West Coast and the East Coast for payment banks. So you'd end up having to change that. But transferring funds between accounts, and it doesn't have to be an account within the same bank. You can transfer to another bank. For example, if you're planning to subsidize your grandchildren's college education, and you want to send them $100 a week or $100 a month or whatever you want to send it, you can set that up to transfer to their bank account automatically. You don't have to send checks, it'll just be automatically transferred to their accounts. Again, you can check for balances, and again, you can you can do transactions at home 24 hours a day. I kind of like the idea of verifying that credit card companies receive their payments, and you can look at the bank site and their site to see that they're in balance. To use your pay through bank Again, you have to set up the account, the address, designate the payee. The advantage of this is that you can pay a credit card company, for example, anything you want through your bank. If you go to the credit card website, it usually gives you a couple choices. One is pay the last statement, pay the current bill, something like that. Whereas if you set it up through your own bank, you can pay them whatever you want individually each month, and you can schedule the date that you want the payment to be made. Mobile banking is becoming a big thing. Most of us are getting smartphones, whether we like it or not. And smartphones have apps which allow us to do most of these banking transactions. The only thing I would caution you on is on a security issue, typically your cell phone goes to a website before it goes to 3G or 4G. And you can turn that off if you want. If you're in a public place, you might want to be careful on that you may inadvertently, because it'll go to the strongest signal. So you might be in Panera and think you're going on your phone on a secured Verizon or whatever network, when in reality you're going on the public network for Panera, and you may not want that exposure. In fact, I would recommend you not accept that exposure. So you can alleviate that by just simply turning the web page, the web network off on your phone and force it to use the Verizon or AT&T or whatever your telephone system is. Those are secure networks. Now, check. This is something relatively new. It's actually been. It was actually used. If you go to the ATM machine, you put a thing in. You put a check in there. It's basically recording it the same way. It's taking a photograph of it, and you notice on the receipt it gives you a picture of the check and what have you. But you can do this from your phone as well with an app that you photograph the check, and the check will automatically be deposited. No, you cannot deposit it more than once. As a matter of fact, that's how some people, what was happening with some IRS checks last year, people were intercepting them and depositing them in their accounts through that picture technique, putting them back in the mail, and then go to you. And how people found out about it is when they went to deposit it a second time, the IRS came back and said, this has already been deposited. You can't do this. So it will not accept the same. But most of the banks, the major banks, have this technology available. The Quick Pay is a means of, I said before that you can transfer funds to your grandchildren's accounts. This is another way of doing that, and you can transfer, I said your grandchildren, you can transfer to anybody. You see the ads for this on television where, 4 people are sitting at dinner and they divide up the bill and they all take their phones out and pay their bills individually. I'm not sure how practical this is, other than for more, like I said, the grandchildren or something like that. I just can't visualize myself sitting at Jameson's with a bunch of people and taking out the cell phones and paying our bills that way, but it is available. That technique will also send a payment to an email address. You don't have to have the bank address. If I wanted to send a payment to Bill Zaletti, I could simply send it to Bill's email address. If Bill is in the program, his email's got an app on there that directs it to his bank account. And I don't know his bank account, and I just know his email address. Again, I'm not sure how practical that is, but it is available. Now, generally, there are some limits on that. Transactions less than $500, most of the banks have these similar restrictions. They'll process that right away, and transactions over $500 will be deposited with a 24-hour delay, and there's usually a limit of so much, in subsequent sessions. And if you're transferring more than $16,000 routinely, talk to me, because I'll give you an email address that would help. But there are some limitations what you can do online. You cannot print banknotes. If you do, you're going to meet with a bunch of folks from the Secret Service very quickly. And there are other limitations too that you have to use with reasonable care. Now, setting up direct charges from vendors to a bank account, certain vendors require you setting them up to a bank account. There are two ways of really doing this. One is if you have vendors, credit card companies, what have you, or vendors, you can charge those accounts to a credit card. And then you decide to pay the credit card. That puts a buffer between your bank account and the vendor. For example, Comcast will do that. A number of people will do that. Certain vendors will not. Unless they've changed recently, Commonwealth Edison would not allow that. You have to go directly to a bank account. CAM will not allow that. You go directly to a bank account. So there are certain vendors that don't allow that buffer transaction. But it's very, if you have it set up to go to, I think the Village of Huntley has to go to a bank account too. I know ours does, but it's very convenient to have these routine bills set up to go to an account directly, which you don't have to handle them. This is particularly true if you're traveling. It also, people say, well, I'd like to know when things are going to hit. You do know when things hit because they'll tell you when they're going to hit. If you do this with Commonwealth Edison, it'll say this bill will be deducted from your bank account on X, whatever date it is. So you can still control how this whole thing is handled, but it just, again, cuts out the paperwork. It saves you the time and effort of actually mailing the check. Now, on a credit card, it's simpler. It's the same procedure. You just set it up that they're going to charge it directly to a credit card. The advantage of a credit card in between is at least a perceived concept of safety, because someone's not going directly, they don't have access to your bank account. They have access to a credit card account. Then you pay the credit card account at your will, and you can control that payment yourself. You've also, if there's a bad charge in there, you're not dealing with your bank and someone, you're dealing with a credit card company and someone, and the credit card companies are generally pretty good at dealing with disputed items. So it really works quite well from that point of view. But there are vendors that will not allow you to do that. As I mentioned before, Commonwealth Edison is one, CAM is one, and there are a number of others, because they don't want to incur the credit card fees that are involved. Now, maintaining your portfolio, your investment portfolio online, has really two aspects to it. The first is knowing what you have and tracking what's happening to what you have. And that can be done very readily through Yahoo Finance, Google Finance, AOL Finance. You put your portfolio in there. They're updated. They used to be on an hour delay. They're now instantaneous. So you can see anytime during the day how much money you've made, how much money you've lost. But on the other hand, until you've actually sold something, you haven't lost a nickel. So you can relax on that point. But the other things, most brokers have the same service. The advantage of the broker's account is that they'll maintain a lot of records for you. They'll maintain, you used to have all these files somewhere. Everyone had a file somewhere of confirmations on transactions. Right? There's no reason for having that anymore. Every brokerage house will maintain that file for you on your computer. Simply go to the account, look at documents, confirmations, etc. The same with statements. We always used to get these monthly statements, and they were bulky, and we thought we religiously had to keep them, right? Someday they might be important. Well, we probably never looked at them again, to be honest with you, but they're very seldom. But they took up a lot of paper, and of course they're financial records, so you can't throw them away, you gotta shred them. So I mean, it just complicates your life all the way through. It's much easier to let the brokerage house keep those records. If you need a financial statement, you can go in that file and you can go back, I think 10 or 12 years in most of the accounts, and pull up the monthly statement that you want. And then you can print it if you want, or you can just look at it or print a piece of it. So it's a much more convenient way of doing things. Now, these are not, we're talking here, most brokerage accounts that we're talking about fall in two categories. If you're dealing with what I'm going to call a mainline brokerage house, and that isn't inferring quality or anything, but traditional brokerage house, that's a non-transactional account. If you have an account with Edward Jones, for example, you can look up a wealth of information. You can look up all the records you need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You cannot transact anything through that account. They will not, you simply can't do it. On the other hand, if you have an E-Trade account or Ameritrade account or some other accounts, you can transact information through those and transact stock transfers. Now, the important part of that is obvious. The level of security you need for a traditional account is far less because they can't do anything. All they can do is look, and the worst that could happen is your neighbor could look up and say, boy, that guy made a lot of dumb decisions. You know, but you can't hurt yourself through those accounts. But when you're dealing with a transactional account, you have to maintain proper, the importance of passwords and security is even much more paramount, much more important. Now, what are the advantages of either account? And that's up for you to decide. Depends on how you maintain your accounts. In the investment club, we have individuals that make 30 and 40 trades a day. I don't make 30 and 40 trades every 10 years, I don't think, and I don't know. So everybody has a different style. But if you're making a lot of trades, the online brokerage firms, the trading transactional firms, will trade at about $5 to $10 a transaction. If you're using a traditional brokerage house, you're going to pay more than that per transaction. So it's a question of your style, what you want to do, and how you want to maintain your portfolios. But again, you should be aware of the difference in those two situations as far as how it can hurt you. Because if someone got your passwords on a transitional account, you know, you could be contributing a lot of money to a lot of people you don't want to contribute it to very easily. Okay, so you have to maintain that level of security on those accounts. You can also do a lot of research. Now, research is available on all of these accounts. It's also very good on Yahoo and on Google Finance, all those. There's a tremendous, that's probably the biggest thing that the computer has helped people with as far as investments in the last 20 years, is the degree of research you can do on your own. There was a time when you pretty much relied on research reports from your broker. They either did a report or they didn't do a report. Now you can go online, you can do your own research. You can also do a lot of screening. There are a lot of screening programs in there. And those screening programs are very helpful for you in terms of going through the morass of stocks and other transactional investments that you can make. You know, for example, you can put on a screening, I want to see every stock that has this PE ratio, that pays a dividend above such and such, and it's priced between such and such and such and such, and it'll give you every stock traded on the New York and NASDAQ, you know, on the exchanges, or you can also specify an exchange if you'd like to. It'll give you a list of all those stocks, and you can start to look at what stocks or investments you'd like to make. Gives you a tremendous amount of information, a tremendous amount of ability to control your own destiny in making investment decisions. Online stock trading, as we said, there are some definite advantages, primarily cost. Also, I would point out the online trading firms probably have a little better analytical information. And they have depending on your volume, there are some people I know that, as I said, do a lot of trading, and It's kind of like the frequent flyer program with the airlines. You know, you get up to different classes, and at a certain class they get access to much more analytical information that the novice, shall I say, would not see. But the information is available. And again, the important thing on transactional accounts is that you maintain security. Credit reports. How many have submitted requests to the government for their credit report in the last year? Quite a few. Well, it's a government. It's actually a government. It's a government site that allows you to get the credit reports free. Well, that's quite a few. One of the things, you have the three companies, basically, TransUnion, Equifax, and Expert. That website doesn't come out. It'll come out better when we put this on on our website. But you're allowed to get, every year, you're allowed to get all three credit reports. Now, there are differences in the credit reports, some, not a lot for the most part, okay? And one of the things that you might want to consider doing is you're allowed to get, as I said, all three credit reports once a year, but you don't have to get all three credit reports at the same time. So you might want to get TransUnion in January and go to Equifax in June. In other words, spreading these out, you're giving yourself a whole year's coverage on your credit reporting and still not having to pay for that. And the website, the government website, that again doesn't show it all, but it will show on the it will show on this when we put this on our website. And I would recommend that you do this periodically. I'd recommend spreading it out, frankly, but it's up to every individual. And then we come back to what's coming up soon, tax preparation. Now, you've got a lot of options on tax preparation. Obviously, you can hire a professional to do your taxes. There are some free services. The IRS has a free service, depending on, I'm not familiar with there are limits on income and things that qualify for that. ARP also has a program that, again, is limited by income and type of return, but that's also free, and that's done by individuals on a volunteer basis. They are trained in that, and they go through a training program, and for the returns they do, they're quite competent in handling that. You can also use one of the two, I'm sure there are more, but I'm familiar, basically with TurboTax and TaxCut. TaxCut used to be Kiplinger's, then it became H&R TaxCut, and those are really good programs. They used to be a lot cheaper than they are now. They're a little more expensive now, but they allow you to file your federal return electronically. Most of them require a charge for filing an Illinois state return, but nonetheless, electronic filing has really a lot of advantages. One of the simplest advantages and most important is you don't allow the IRS to make mistakes. A lot of mistakes in the tax business come from simply transcribing information. Whenever you move information from Form A to Form B, you present a problem in terms of potentially creating an error. By filing electronically, it goes in electronically. You don't have anyone monkeying around with the numbers, and so you virtually eliminate clerical errors, probably limit them to your own clerical errors, but both of these programs will probably catch any clerical error that you're going to make, unless it's a really well thought out end run of some kind. But for the most part, they do have some very good logic programs in there. The other thing is, with TurboTax or TaxCut, typically when you start with one, you stay with that one. And the reason, although they do transfer between the accounts, they're much smoother in terms of taking your information from last year and putting it into this year and going forward. Now, out here, and I'm venturing a guess, but I'm probably not that far off, for the most part, your returns are all the same year in and year out. Now, the numbers may vary a little bit, okay? But you're gonna get a 1099-R from a pension fund somewhere. The numbers may change, but all the static information, company ABC, that'll all be the same. The same with the Social Security. All those numbers, the actual amount that they're showing will change, but the detailed data, the government does not change their identification number year to year. Same with your brokerage accounts. You're going to get a 1099-R if you have a IRA that you're drawing funds from. You're going to get a 1099 if you have other transactions, dividends, what have you. And right now, depending, we're in a transitional mode, but right now, even your changes, if you sell a stock, that's going to show up on your 1099. If you bought that stock with your brokerage firm within the last so many years, they'll pick up the capital gain on it. They'll calculate the capital gain on it. Now they're in a transitional because a lot of people still they don't have that purchase information in the system. But what I'm saying is that unless you're changing brokerage houses and things a lot, all of these things are going to be the same, other than the numbers themselves. And it makes it very easy because when you do the return, you pull up last year, it says import last year's, it brings up 1099-R1 and 1099-R2 if you happen to have IRA and a pension, and you just fill the numbers in and you're home free. I personally think that it's really nifty. Now, I think the other thing that I really like is when you file two aspects, well, I guess three in a sense. Two aspects, though, clearly, are that you file electronically. You don't have to stand in line at the Huntley Post Office, okay? And you don't have to wait 5 or 6 weeks to get that little green card back saying that the government got your return. Typically, you get a confirmation back. They usually say 8 hours or something like that. I've been getting those back in about 2 hours, and it just, the deal is done then. One day it's over. They got the return, everything's hunky-dory, and we go forward. Now, they will charge you for the state return. I think it's $10 or $15, I forget what it is. It's pretty close to, by the time you pay postage to mail the old return, you're probably about almost breaking even on that score. But again, state of Illinois, they're not quite as quick as the federal government, I found, but they'll get it back within a couple hours, 5, 6 hours, something like that, and it's a closed loop. So I think it's well worth considering if you're not doing that. Now, we've talked about this. Both of these software packages will perform an audit of your return when you do it. In fact, that's one of the steps in the process. That's a logic audit. That is not saying, for example, if you put in that you gave to the Salvation Army $900 and it all fits and adds up and carries forward, it's not going to challenge that. When in reality, you only put $1.50 in a little red bucket, okay? That's a different level of audit, okay? And they have people in the government that look into those things. But this program will not. But it will catch if you make a logical error that, you checked a block for this and then you didn't put the data in for it, or if it didn't add up. Well, you won't have a question if it won't add up because it does all the adding for you. But it does give you a very good logic check, carries over the static information, and it has the additional benefit of filing electronically. And electronic filing, as we mentioned, you don't have to wait in line, you don't have to pay for the mailing, and your manual input is avoided, so the information goes to the IRS correctly. Now, online purchases, now we're just coming off the Christmas holiday season, and a lot of people have done a lot of online purchases, I'm sure. That's really getting more and more perfected to an art. A few years ago, that was kind of a catch and catch can thing to a certain extent. But right now, to me, it's really a marvelous thing. You can go on Amazon or any number of places, and the variety of options you have of equipment, purchase options, et cetera, is unbelievable. So you have a great deal of availability of product. Now, that's probably not as important to us in a sense, because in this area we've got a lot of stores, we've got a lot of choices for buying things. But if you live out somewhere in the middle of nowhere, this is a godsend, because you don't have the stores, you don't have those options, and this gives you the options. Confidence, pick good vendors. Pick vendors you understand. Obviously, Amazon is one of the key players. Amazon has a lot of, I'm not sure what they call them, but I'm going to call them sub-companies that they deal with, but they guarantee those products, and they stand behind them. So you still have Amazon standing behind you on that. The advantage, is that you're shipping, you're paying for shipping. And this always comes up, well, I don't mind, I got to pay for shipping online. You're paying for shipping no matter where you buy something. It's just a question of whether you see it as a line item or not. And more, particularly around the holidays and things, there are free shipping programs. Amazon has their Amazon Prime program where you pay $99 a year, and then you get all your shipping free after that. Okay, so if you do a lot of business with Amazon, and then it has some other advantages with free movies and free books and things like that as well. But at any rate, I really think that online purchasing is becoming into its forefront. People say, well, how do I deal with something I don't like? I got to return it. Well, they've all gone a long way toward dealing with that. I purchased something this year and we wanted to return it. It was from Amazon. And I just went on the Amazon site to the bill that I had, clicked on want to return. They gave me a thing to print out, which was a return authorization and a mailing label. Put it back in the box, took it over to Route 47 to UPS, gave them the box. 2 days later, we had a credit on our credit card. So they're really beginning to handle those things extremely well. The other way they do this, in many cases, if there's a local operation here, like Home Depot, let's say, if you go to Home Depot online and buy something, you have the option of having it sent to your house or Home Depot over on Randall Road. And if you want to return it, you just take it back to Home Depot on Randall Road. So they've really gone a long way to make the process very easy to use. And then it comes down to keeping books and records. Quicken is probably the best. I'm sure there are some others out there. There used to be several, but they've all kind of gone by the wayside. Quicken has several versions. Depends on what you're doing with Quicken. Most people use what's called the deluxe version. I don't know why it's called the deluxe version, because it's basically a basic version. But anyway, but there is another version that deals with a business. Deals with the issues of heavy investment transactions and things of that nature. So there are different versions of this. But basically, Quicken allows you to keep your records in a way that you can, number one, recover them, find them, go back and look things up. It gives you budgeting functions. It gives you a lot of analytical things, depending on what kinds of things. If you're buying a house or a big investment of some kind, there are a number of analytical tools that you can use. And it's really a very good product. Now, I have one thing that everyone else thinks is an advantage to this product, and that is that it'll download everything from your bank and your credit card, so you don't have to input it yourself. I'm an old-fashioned financial guy that I like to reconcile records. And I like to have my records agree with their records, and until proven otherwise, my records are correct, not theirs. I had one gentleman come in the lab and say, he really liked this new Quicken. He said he used to have such a terrible time at his bank. He said, I could never get these things reconciled. We always had differences. It was really terrible. He said, sometimes they were wrong, sometimes I was wrong. He said, but I spent all this time reconciling things. He said, the nice thing about Quicken now is I get everything from the bank, it downloads, goes on my computer, and it's all in agreement. I don't have to reconcile anything. Well, I'm not sure that's good, folks. It doesn't take long to input your transactions and reconcile them back. I do think that's an important control to maintain. But nonetheless, Quicken does organize your records, and again, you know, all those lists you kept of how much you spent on utilities and all that kind of stuff, it's all on Quicken, and you can put it once. But again, back to Florida, no matter where we go, we can be online. Any questions? I've been asked to make an announcement. Please be very careful as you go out the door, that the walkways apparently have turned to ice outside. So I was just handed that note, so please be very careful when you do leave. But any questions? Okay. Yes, Bob?
I'm wondering what your opinion is of the fact that having our bank information being online and our credit card information being online, we used to keep boxes and boxes of papers every year. And you had this box marked 2014 full of bank receipts and credit card receipts. What do you think? Do we need to keep all that stuff like we used to?
Absolutely not. I'm sorry, I talked about that in terms of brokerage houses and confirmations and whatever. Same would be applicable with any financial transactions. And, you know, the big thing is those are all a pain in the neck to get rid of, because you do have to shred them, or you should. And so keeping these things online, and the bank, you can go back and get bank records anytime you want. And the other thing about that is we all religiously kept those records, and if we honestly said how many times we ever referred to them, it would probably be very seldom. So no, I definitely think that record keeping is an important part of that. Yes?
Just because I'm cheap, I use the online tax reporting, and I file my federal return, but then I print out the thing and I go to the Illinois Department of Revenue site and I e-file Illinois for free.
Okay.
The other thing is that with Quicken, the difference between Deluxe and Premier is Premier has a little bit more reporting for investment transactions.
Yeah.
But I found out that every year they offer you $10 off for an upgrade, but if you wait about 2 months, they send you an email and give you it for 50%.
Yeah, and actually, they've been sending me emails for quite a while. They haven't reached the Costco price. Costco is still cheaper than all the offers I've gotten online. Yes, over here. Wait for the mic, please.
Yes, what's the difference between Quicken and your brokerage record keeping, provided that all your bill payment and everything goes through your brokerage? Would be any different?
Well, Quicken allows you to account for all transactions, your credit card transactions, your cash transactions, everything. It depends on how much you want to put into Quicken. Your brokerage account will keep track of whatever runs through the brokerage account, which, depending on the individual and how they use
Right,
it.
so that's what I'm saying. If you pay all your bills through your brokerage account.
It would be very similar. The only difference is that on Quicken, when you pay a bill, you can decide what category, they use the word category rather than account, but what category you put it in. So if I want to look up, how much did I spend on whatever, I can do that on Quicken very easily.
You can do the same thing. For example, I know on Fidelity's brokerage, you can set up your own categories. Credit card categories.
Again, it depends on the brokerage account and how you're using it. Most people do not pay all their bills through the brokerage account, but if it works for you, so be it. The idea is to try to minimize the amount of paper that you're actually dealing with. Okay. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming out, and Be very careful going home, and have a great day.
I just ordered everything Quicken Home and Business. Because I had for my business, I was using the Peach Street, which is a very complicated double entry system.
This is an easy one. I don't really use it. I downloaded it, but I can't.
What's that?
Quicken.
Yeah?
It's fine. So I don't have much active
Oh, yeah.
trading and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I